Hey friends, this is Tabitha Bigbee, Thursday Night Live with Christian Faith Campus in Big Bear, California, with my apologies for completely missing my February 2nd date of going live. It wasn't even that I forgot about it. I didn't even have it on my calendar for that day, which is extremely unlike me. And I will tell you, I'm glad that it was me that missed it and not someone else. That has never happened before in the entire time that we've been doing Thursday Night Live. No one has ever missed a day. And it was me. And again, I'm glad it was me and not somebody else, because I'm definitely the most intense about consistency, and I'm the one who missed it. So it's good. But I'm going to make it short and sweet since we've got another Thursday Night Live coming up in like 2 days. I just want to encourage you to remember that none of this Christian walk, none of what we're doing is about your performance, your qualifications, what you have or have not done. All that matters is coming back to your relationship, focusing on what's true between you and the Lord, and everything will fall into place from there. We remember our identity in Him. We remember that we're united with Him. We choose to believe God. And when we choose to believe God, it creates an organic, a reflexive trickle down in our lives. And because we choose to believe God above anything else, and sorry, it's my dog. I'm in the car and thanks. That's Juniper. When we choose to just believe God and we continue to feed our self-truth through His written and spoken and incarnate word, then as we're out here listening to other things, the contrast will be stark between capital T truth and what maybe the world is trying to tell us is truth. And I'm not talking about the big stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff right now in the world that is just so blatantly not truth. I'm talking about those little things, maybe that are part of church even, that seem like they're true through repetition because we're used to doing it that way, because we're used to hearing it, but maybe it's actually not how we actually do relationship with the Lord. So, I don't know. That's something for us all to think about. Okay, now she's settled down. She's 10 months old, so she's in that place where she's got her big dog body and strength and stamina, but then her little puppy brain. And sometimes it's a little squirrely. I'm so thankful for her. I'm so thankful for a lot of things. At the beginning of the year, there were a few things that I wanted to implement in my life, not because it was the new year. It was just kind of coincidentally the new year. I don't do New Year's resolutions. I think that they are a pitfall. I do retrospectives on my life for the last year, and then I check in with the Lord on the dreams and desires that He has put in my heart and see, what's the next step here, Lord? And I have CEO meetings on a regular basis, but I do not do New Year's resolutions, but I occasionally integrate new habits into my life. And this was one of those times. And I, every day, have just been writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for that day. And it's been really fun. And there's no pressure. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be deep. It can be super shallow. And that's all that matters. The Lord told me that a grateful heart is a receiving heart. And He said, increase your gratitude. And He was like, you're not ungrateful. That's not what I'm saying. You're already grateful, but there's a lot that you're going to need to be able to receive. And so increase your capacity by increasing your gratitude. And I was like, yes, sir, that makes sense. And that's an easy enough assignment. All right, that was kind of a tangent. So I have been reading Genesis and Revelation simultaneously with my Passion Translation and my ESV. And it's really fun because it's literally the beginning of the story and the end of the story. But both of them are about the revelation of Jesus. He is throughout all parts of this. And some things that stood out to me as really important things to understand about who we are as humans. So Genesis 1, because that's where humans started, is that Adam and Eve, when we hear the story of the fall, frequently it's told in a way, and people are still doing this, or human nature has always been human nature. We laugh about it thinking, Adam's relationship to us, Eve's relationship to us. Like, oh, Eve did that, I do that too. That's so funny. People are people. Yes, but there's a little shift here. And it's an incredibly important shift, and I will work my way up to it. So please bear with me. So in Genesis 3, when we have the fall, Adam and Eve set the blueprint for the rest of human behavior for all time. So it's what the Lord showed me is it's not like funny coincidence, haha. It's they literally created the blueprints of human behavior when they're in unbelief. All right. So in chapter 3, God has called them out. Why are you where you are? Why are you hiding? Did you eat of the tree? The man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree and I ate. First of all, if we back up to verse 11, it says she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her. He was with her. He wasn't off tending something else and she was like, here's this fruit. I don't know which one it is. Have fun. No, he was with her. So two things happen in this moment. Adam steps out of his identity as the caretaker. Yeah. And then, out of shame, he blame shifts. He gets defensive, a little arrogance there. So he drops identity and he passes blame because of the shame and condemnation he is feeling. Then he talks to Eve. And he's also not being entirely honest here. I would just like to add. But God shifts over to Eve and what have you done? And in my mind, I hear this voice that's just like, I think what we have to remember is that the Lord is so sad at this moment. So sad. This is not what he wanted for his kids, for any of us. Eve is so honest. The serpent deceived me and I ate. Now, within that, though, Eve says, well, the serpent is the one who deceived me, and she relinquishes free will. I was deceived. I didn't have a choice. And then she chooses victimhood at the same time by doing so. So he gives up his role of authority, and he shifts the blame because he's feeling shame. She chooses victimhood. Oh, gosh, even as I'm saying it, like just the profundity of it all is right there because we all continue in these same patterns. So she chooses victimhood and relinquishes free will. I didn't have a choice because I was deceived. When we get into any of those four things, we are just undone. We are undone in our souls. And as I was reading through all of this, the beauty of our redemption was also revealed to me. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is exciting. So something I did also want to clarify, little Bible school here, is that God cursed the serpent and he cursed the ground, but he never cursed Adam and Eve. If he had cursed Adam and Eve, nothing else that he did would make sense. So we've got a situation now where tragedy has struck. From this point forward, God already knows exactly how he is going to bring his kids back into unity with him. And, we can go to John and Romans for all of that. But then what's interesting here is that in verse 15, we have the first foreshadowing of Jesus. The Lord is speaking to the serpent, and he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring, Jesus. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So good. So then meanwhile, I'm reading Revelation and I'm seeing over and over in every letter to the church, at the very beginning of each letter, it talks about who Jesus is. And it's so beautiful. And I went through and just was studying it. Because if we trust that the book of John, the Gospel of John, Big John, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. Nothing was created without the Word, and Jesus is the Word. Then we know that at that moment, Genesis moment, Jesus was there. He was part of all creation. And then even what he would do for humanity, his perfect sacrifice, alluded to shortly thereafter. Then here in Revelation, we've got that the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. He is the words of him who has the sharp 2-edged sword. The words of the Son of God, who has eyes like a flame of fire and whose feet are like burning. And these are all deeply meaningful. I've actually been reading through with the Passion Translation, which has just, it's so beautiful. And it really helps because it puts so it was translated from its language where it was full of deep, deep meaning into English and lost some stuff. So it's kind of like also reading through Song of Solomon with the Passion Translation is really exciting because all of a sudden it's not just about pomegranates. It's about spirit, soul, and body. And you're like, oh, righteousness and salvation. I get the picture. Same thing here in Revelation. And Jesus is being revealed through every single chapter, every portion of this book. So then to be reading Genesis at the same time and seeing how these people are going to need every single one of these attributes of who Jesus is, that because of who he is, these people are about to experience. I mean, it's just so cool. 10 out of 10 recommend. Also, in Revelation, when it says the person who reads this will be blessed, I realized it's not a reward for reading the book. It's because the more that I know who Jesus is, the more empowered I am, and the more unbelief I shake off out of my soul. And therefore I'm more capable of receiving the blessing, capital T, capital B. So anyway, that is what I have been studying lately. It has just been so deeply exciting and satisfying. And then one other thing that I saw that's separate, but always part of the same story in Joshua. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges. That's how I remember it. I have to sing it. So in Joshua chapter 5, Joshua and Caleb are now leading the Hebrew nation. They have been wandering around for 40 years in the desert because the generation before them did not believe God and would not shake free their slave mentality to go into the land of rest. And I just want to add, it was, again, not just a punishment that they weren't allowed to enter the promised land. It was because everything at that point was old covenant and from the outside in instead of from the inside out. And their unbelief couldn't be corrected from the inside out because they couldn't be born again. And that generation had to pass away in order for the new generation to be able to believe who they were in God to move forward into what he promised for them. So it's not just that God was like, I'm smiting you. So there's this really beautiful moment. They have their first Passover in Canaan. The day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate of the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain, and the manna ceased the day after they ate of the produce of the land. And there was no longer manna for the people of Israel, but they ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. This is so deeply exciting. We no longer need manna. We eat of the fruit of the land. After the Passover. We're after the Passover. I made a note here. Now we eat freely of and with Jesus in rest. And then I couldn't help but remember that in John 4:32, after Jesus has been encouraging that beautiful woman at the well, that the disciples are like, we got some food for you, bro. And he's like, I've had a meal that you know nothing about. And then Psalm 23 about feasting at the table with Jesus. And just all these different references. And I was so encouraged because here we see the Old Testament just always pointing to the New Testament, always pointing to Jesus. And after the Passover, so the Passover, in case we're not familiar, is literally in Egypt, the angel of death passed over the homes that were marked with the blood of a lamb. So we are marked with the blood of the perfect lamb, Jesus, and death has passed over us and cannot touch us because we are now perfectly created. You're only as good as your sacrifice in the Jewish religion, and our sacrifice was Jesus. We have the perfect sacrifice, and his blood is over our hearts, marking us as free from death, free from all punishment. This is why there can be no fear in love, because we're free from punishment. That's 1 John 4:18. So they remembered that event from Egypt, and it became the Passover, which is, still celebrated, obviously, and it's this beautiful symbolic meal. After the Passover, they ate of the land. And this is so important for us because, so we know where we came from. We were the Adam and Eve. We had that corruption. And then Jesus came as our perfect sacrifice. And now we are living after the Passover, eating the good of the land. And we no longer need the manna from heaven, that the grace that God was putting out over people. There's more about that in Hebrews that gets really exciting, but go read it. It's really interesting. And in Romans. But we now have the real deal. We have the full feast. We eat the good of the land. We are at the table eating with Jesus. And there's so much more I could say about this. I could get very excited, but I'm going to finish up here. I said I was going to keep it short and I didn't. It's fine. But this is who we are. We are post-resurrection people who are eating the goodness. We are post-resurrection people who remember that our sacrifice was perfect and made us perfect. We remember that the seed of Adam has been totally removed from us and replaced with Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Yes, it's very exciting. All right. I love you all so much. I stand in agreement with every single person who's listening to my voice, who is born again, that this information just seeps into the very marrow of their understanding. Then anyone who has not made a decision to believe Jesus as the Son of God, the perfect sacrifice who was resurrected, that this word is now planted in them and the Holy Spirit can bring them to that choice to believe and confess. And we praise you, Lord, because you are goodness itself. All right. Thank you, friends. Bye.